Hello, welcome to Everyday Experts. I am your host, Sir Joker, or Achilles, or Joker, whatever nomenclature you like to call me today. I am here with an extremely amazing human being. I don't know a lot of people who just have a dearth of knowledge where you talk to them, you like learn. I've been working with autism and mental health since 2004, and 20 minutes on the phone with Colleen, and I was like, all right, I got to get my notebook out and start taking notes because I see I'm going to learn something. So I actually like to talk to people where I can learn stuff and get knowledge and get wisdom from people. Colleen is also, on top of being like this bevy of knowledge, I'm going to try to remember it all. She's going to yell at me if I get stuff wrong. She's a mom of 3. She is an adjunct professor, I believe. If it's not, I'm going to get yelled at. She is, I think, vice president of the PTA. I don't know why she would do that to herself on top of everything else. She has a bunch of jobs and a bunch of stuff. And I tried to write her title down. I ran out of ink in my 2 pens, and I was just like, I'm just going to roll with it. She is one of my good friend, Kelly, who's her sister, who we're going to talk shit about later. She's one of her good friends. So there are a lot of people that I have been graced and lucky enough to bring on the show. But today, coming to the motherfucking stage, the one and only Miss Colleen Farrell. Oh, man. I found a great quote that I think sums up a lot of what we're talking about. If you can help a child, you don't have to spend years repairing an adult. So deep, and being that we work the 2 bookends of that world, it's so true. So much of it trickles back to childhood.
Yeah.
Miss Colleen, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. So I tried to go through all of your titles. I forgot public speaker and in this, and probably queen of something, and Meghan Markle's like stand-in. I don't know what else it would be. Are you ready to go? Ready to take flight?
Ready. Yeah, let's go.
My first question is the first question I ask everybody. If you could be a vampire, a werewolf, a wolf, a zombie, a ghost, a witch, or a serial killer, which one would you be and why?
Okay, that's easy. I would be a witch.
Ooh, you're a Wiccan.
Yeah. Well, my why is because actually witches do good. I believe in that connection to the universe, and just the goodness of witches is actually where I would go.
I like it.
Yeah.
I always pick serial killer, and people always look at me like I'm crazy, and I tell them that why do I pick serial killer? Because I feel like they're the only ones that are somewhat connected to reality, and they're real. They're not creatures. But anyway, so you have all of the titles and all of New York. I think you have every one. So let's start with little baby Colleen.
Okay.
Your parents got divorced young. What was that like? How did that impact you?
Yeah, so they were married. They got married young, so they were married over 20 years. And but I was 9, when they divorced. Yeah, and it wasn't easy. There were 4 of us, and my mom at the time had just finished her master's degree. She was working full time as a nurse practitioner of psychology and just multiple jobs. Yeah, so we had to, hold down the fort, which we did. And but work ethic was definitely pushed on us at a very young age, for sure. Yeah,
holding down the fort in 4. So I know your sister Kelly. I know you have another sister. I don't remember her name because I've only met her a couple times. Don't yell at me, sister, whose name I don't remember. And I know you have a brother.
Yeah. So we're Kelly, Katie, Colleen, and Kenny. Actually, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Wait, so hold on. Kelly, Katie, Colleen, and Kenny. So are you the only C?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow. So how did you politic your parents to get that done? Like, did you give them a bribe on the side?
They knew I was just going to be the best one, so they had to change it up. Yeah.
So you're saying you're the best.
Throw that out there because they all might be on, so I just had to.
Okay. Yeah. So you feel like you're the best sibling.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. We're coming out the gate on fire. The best. So your mom worked a lot. She was an RN. She was a registered nurse. Oh.
Yeah. She was a labor and delivery nurse, and then got her master's in psychology, and then became an NP of psychology. Yeah, nurse practitioner. So she does a lot of work around mental health.
Is that one of the things that you kind of saw? And I know this is a question we're going to ask later, but is that one of the things that you kind of saw in, I don't know if you were impressed by it or maybe influenced by it and kind of like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's also just part of temperament of my personality that I was just naturally drawn to helping people and just being in a field of service, to want to support and in any way. And then it also, my love for young children and just wanting to work with children is kind of, and it all kind of lends themselves to each other. Early childhood education and mental health, psychology, they lend themselves perfectly to each other. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. John Gitben. Thank you for joining the show, sir. Mr. Gitben wants to know, are your parents' names K's as well? I like alliteration.
No, D's. Debbie and Doug. Yeah.
Okay. I like it. So they're the same. I see. They didn't want to give you the D's. I understand that. So mom was working a lot. How was the relationship with dad? Did you see him a lot? Was he working a lot too?
Yeah, so he actually worked for the Long Island Railroad as an engineer. And so we actually saw him. He had, weird scheduling. So we saw him every Tuesday and Wednesday, like no matter what. He was very much involved. But we only saw him after school on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. That was it. We didn't sleep there. So it wasn't easy, but he was front and center for all of it. Still, he still is. So, yeah.
So your sister Kelly and your brother, they both posed challenges to you when you were younger. One of them, Kelly, didn't talk a lot. Didn't talk at all. How did that impact you? And how did that, in terms of having a sisterly relationship, when your sister doesn't really talk a lot, how did that grow?
We were close. Kelly talked to us at home. Didn't talk outside the house for a long time, but we were always close. Kelly was the number one kind of caretaker in the house, and she handled household a lot. She was the oldest, and she just kind of ran the show. And
some things don't
outside the house. She just, wouldn't, talk. And so she had selective mutism for until she got older. And I want to say 8th grade is when she started talking. Yeah.
Do you think that was a result of the parents getting divorced? And Jamie Hollowell says hi, by the way.
She's a very special person. Jamie's on my team too. Hi, Jamie.
Hey, girl. Hey, James.
I love her. Yeah, I think, no, I'm not sure, honestly, because I think just in general, some children just will develop that. And it's not necessarily connected to, stress and anxiety. It could have just happened because even now we'll talk about it and she's not really sure, where it came from. But we had a tough time in school for that. Teachers didn't try to support her. They only would try to get her to talk when she really just wasn't comfortable. So she just needed to go through her own time and be ready. But it was probably not easy for her. I think for me, even as a young child, I want to say I just accepted her for who she was at that time. And because she talked at home and that's all that really mattered, just not outside the house. And Kenny, your question about Kenny, my youngest, he was really young when they separated. So he was 5 and it impacted him a lot. And he was the only boy. And, he was, he was diagnosed with ADHD a few years later. But back then, I mean, he's, in his mid-30s now. So that was a long time ago. And they didn't really know much of what to do with it then. And in Catholic school, we all went to Catholic school. So they definitely didn't have the services that he needed back then to support him.
Yeah. And that's kind of interesting that it was almost like you saw these different like previews of the stuff you deal with now. Because we talked a lot about diagnosis during our pre-interview and how they're quick to pull the trigger on some of them, and the school's responses, which is kind of some of the stuff that you deal with. The school responses to it is a big deal because I do feel like, and I'm sure you do too, that a lot of times the responses just aren't good.
Right. They're not.
I like it. So what is it like? And this is not necessarily directly a parenting question. We'll go into that later, but you have kids of your own. What's it like working with kids as opposed to being a parent?
I always say it's 2 completely different roles, right? So when you're emotionally connected, it's harder to control your own emotions or to stay calm, when your own child's having a tantrum versus, the hot buttons that I may have within home, like within the kids, I never had in the classroom when I was working directly in the classroom. So a child could have a tantrum and cry and scream, and I was always calm and I would always, be their co-regulator and help them to, come back and problem solve. And so, but then, at home, sometimes, it's a little different because we're so emotionally connected that you could be exhausted and it's 9 o'clock at night and they, get, when they were little, now that they're older, it's gotten so much easier. But when they were little, it was tough. They work full time, like, running around trying to balance all of it. And then they'd have a tantrum in the middle of like Stop and Shop. And I'm like, I hope nobody around knows that I'm an early childhood specialist because I'm about to just keep moving. And, so it's, it's real. Like I keep it real. And I tried to tell folks, especially when they're asking about how to handle behavior is, I share the mistakes that I've made to help others learn new skills.
You don't make mistakes.
I do.
No, you don't.
Every day.
How often, I know this is me personally when I work with kids, that I'll do stuff with my kids that I know I shouldn't be doing. I'm like, I tell parents not to do this, and I do it all the time.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, hope they're not watching right now.
Yep. Like if my voice raises, I'm like, I need to shut this window. Nobody can hear me.
You're yelling. You're like, oh, Did I really take my time? Did I really explain how I felt? Nah, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I can say, if I do lose my cool, and have a moment, like a human moment, I'll talk to them about it later. Like, especially now that they're 6, 9, 11, I'll say, I'm really sorry that I acted that way. I should have, taken my deep breaths and taken a moment, and I'll reflect with them often, just because I feel like it's important that they see that their parents make mistakes and that they lose their cool, and then it's okay to reflect back and to just let's talk through it, and I've always done that. Even when they were like super little, as like, I'm so sorry. And I think that that's just being vulnerable and showing that you're human. They need to see it.
It was serial killer confirmed. You're right. I don't know what you're talking about, John Gippin. Shh, don't tell my secrets. Me and my daughter got into a kerfuffle the other day, and it was funny because I was going to apologize to her for yelling at her because her therapist suggested it. And she did something else that got me mad. So the next day I apologized in her face. She just didn't know what to do. She was like, but I do encourage parents, like a lot of what you're saying is that we grew up with the belief that our parents are always right.
Yeah.
And you have to learn that, one, parents aren't always right. And the kids have to have that leeway to have that, like I call it, giving them space to be themselves. Like if you don't like something I'm saying, I know I'm the mean parent, and I'm okay with that. They can tell me I'm mean, and I give them that space because they don't have to necessarily like what all I'm saying. And
right.
How do I make them emotionally complete if I don't let them know that I get it?
Yeah.
But about me, I'm the boring one. So, high school, Catholic school, huh? Catholic school girl.
Yeah.
What was that like as opposed to working with a lot of public schools? But first, what was Catholic school like?
Catholic school, I mean, St. John the Baptist, I went to, and it was, I mean, I loved it. It was great. And I had a good experience, and it was strict, and, it was structured, and, but it also, the same issues that are in public school are in Catholic school as well, just in a different way. But I stayed involved in sports. I actually played softball since I'm 5 years old, and I still play now on a team. So I stayed active, playing multiple sports, and to just kind of stay out of trouble and focus. Yeah.
What role did sports play in the house growing up? Because I know, Jerry's big into sports, and Kelly is, and my baby Liv, and then the annoying twins, and you guys. So it seemed like sports is kind of really big in your whole family.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we all played softball. Katie and I, the sister that you forgot, Katie, because she's the middle child, so everybody forgets about her. It's fine. We talk about it.
Katie, I love you. You're the best.
So her and I, Kelly had a knee injury. So by the time all of us went through St. John's, and by the time I got there, Katie and I were on varsity together. I made it as a freshman, and Katie was a junior. So she was my captain for 2 years on teams. And then for college, we both went off to play college ball. And we both made the NCAA tournament at the same time, just different spots. Yeah, because we were in different parts of the state. Yeah. And all three of us still play softball together. We're on the same team. So we play like around the Babylon area.
So you guys are running Ponzi schemes. I got it. Covert operation. I like it. What did sports bring into your life in terms of structure and order and things like that? Because I'm sure that's a lot of what you talk about working with the people you work with.
Yeah, I think, you learn, number one, it does help you stay grounded, right?
Yeah.
And it actually, I don't ever remember it being an option of playing sports. And so I think even if I got to a place that I didn't want to do it, I don't know if I would have been allowed to not do it.
Mm.
I think for me, am also the one that had a little bit of edge, that I could have gone a different direction, right? So it's true. I won't go too far into it,
Oh.
but and so for me, I always had that to fall back on, and
Mm.
I took it very seriously, and I loved it. So I did softball and we did cheerleading, all of us. But
Oh.
again, it was something that was constant every day after school. And I just think being part of a team, becoming a captain, it builds leadership skills, it builds confidence, being able to work well with others.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many characteristics that come from being involved in
Right.
sports.
I know you coach cheerleading now, correct? I don't know if you coach softball. I know you coach cheerleading. How did that transition? How does coaching transition, and how does that impact the kids you work with different than maybe what you do for work?
Yeah. So, what I found when I became my daughter's cheerleading coach, there were 31 8-year-old girls, right? And my focus is early childhood, and I really just get to see more 5 and under. And so we've been seeing a lot of behaviors with the 5 and unders, which we'll talk more, I'm sure. But with these
Mm-hmm.
8-year-olds, I really wanted to bring in my problem solving abilities, because the first month that I came in, we were seeing so many emotions and lots of crying and
Mm.
fighting and arguing, but I was also seeing a lack of problem solving abilities. So children not being able to say, I don't like it when you talk to me like that, or that hurt my feelings, or not.
Mm.
And so I found myself, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be for these kids.
Mm.
I fell in love with them really quick. That age, seeing my daughter kind of come out of her shell, because that's part of her temperament, is she's just a little more reserved and making friends and all of this, right? So I just found myself kind of embedding myself into their social emotional learning versus and even though I had the skills to teach them cheer, I wanted to teach them some things about their social emotional development that maybe they're not getting enough
Did
of, those
did
moments to
Yeah.
problem solve and bring girls together and be like, we have a problem. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm hearing, and just help them to work through it. And I use something called the 6 steps in conflict resolution, of how to help children to navigate through conflict.
Mm.
Yeah. So I did a lot. I took my professional experience and I took it into these kids and I felt like I was bringing it to the community. And so I'm doing it again this year. They interviewed me and I was accepted. So I'm pretty happy about that. It's quite intense. Yeah, it's a kind of a big deal.
It's
So
just serious.
it's
It's the
serious,
chairmanship. Yeah.
but it's a lot of work. But now I see these kids through the community on the fields, and they're, waving, and they're coming over and hugging me. And so I enjoy it. I do.
Mm. Okay. So one of the people Ghostwriter asked about executive functioning. Um, how does that kind of play into the idea of executive functioning and emotional regulation, which I kind of put together most of the time? How does that play into you working with? I'm assuming it's girls mostly. I don't know if it's boys too. I'm not saying it can't be. How does that, like the whole idea of executive functioning and emotional development, tie into the coaching and the cheerleading and what you're teaching the kids in the 6 steps that you talked about?
Yeah. So what we know about executive functioning, it's like right here, right? And so if our emotions are triggered, right? We call it, like, if you take your hand like this, and this is your executive functioning, you flip
Mm-hmm.
your lid, right? So when a child's lid is flipped, which means they're heightened in emotion in some way. They absolutely cannot learn a new skill in that moment. So even if you have a school age child, any age person in general, like we don't think straight when our lids are flipped, right? So we don't respond well, we don't problem solve well. So we have to regulate the emotions before we can even get to problem solving, right? So for even to learn a new skill, a sport, this, if you have a child that's struggling with anxiety and depression, right? And they're anxious and they're nervous, and you can tell there's certain signs that when they're feeling nervous, they're going to have a hard time learning. So they need to have that executive function work, and in order to do that, we need to co-regulate. And that's a big term that we use in the early childhood world, is that in those moments when children are really, really upset, we can't join their chaos. We have to bring the calm. And bringing the calm means that we co-regulate, and they don't know how to do it. So like, I always say, like, has anyone ever calmed down in the history of being told to calm down? Like, no one calms down. Like, calm down. Like, don't you tell me to calm down, right? But we tell kids to calm down all the time.
Relax, it'll be okay.
Stop, relax, calm down, you'll be fine. And they're not fine, right? So I think sometimes just in those moments of validating their feelings is a way to help them to calm down, right? Like and I think we all come from a good place. It's natural. We were told growing up to calm down, and you did. You were quiet because there was no free space to express emotion safely. It's different now, and I think we have to kind of move with those times of helping these kids learn how to do it on their own, versus somebody saying, in order to do that, you have to co-regulate with them first to give them the skills to do it on their own.
Dropping knowledge already. See, she's making me look bad. So when we talk about, you went to Mount St. Mary for undergrad. What was it? Child education?
I actually studied. I didn't think I was going into the education world. Like, I studied psychology, and I studied communications. Actually, I knew I wanted to be out there speaking and public speaking and doing things like that. I just kind of fell into the childcare sector. Yeah.
100%. Mr. Get Bent said that I hear a lot of people that have been diagnosed with ADHD at a later age say that they have huge problems with executive function. It's not even the age. It's ADHD comes like kind of part and parcel with executive functioning, because if you look at kind of like the 8 parts of executive functioning, there's usually some aspect that they struggle with, whether it's being flexible with their emotions and stuff like that. But he's asking you, not me. Colleen, please, elaborate. What are your thoughts on executive functioning and ADHD?
Yeah, I mean, you just said it, and I think, that ability to organize and stay focused is part of that executive functioning, right? So, yeah, I agree with that statement that, if you're diagnosed at a later age, I just think as adults, we maybe have more skill sets to also, I also think about the environment, right? So children with ADHD and or other things may not be able to learn inside that box, right? And as adults, we know we can step out of that box and do it in ways that make sense to us. And it may not be the cultural norm of what the dominant culture thinks we should be doing but why not? Why can't we do things in different ways, if that makes sense? So like in a classroom setting, that's really difficult. I think if someone is struggling at that adult age with ADHD, what is your passion? Like, where does your executive functioning kind of work well? And would that be the career or the set that you would go to? Right? Like, my brother is in the restaurant business, and he moves fast. It's perfect. Like, he could never sit at a desk. Never. Still. And he's an adult. And he still has, I don't feel like you outgrow it. I just think you learn how to live with it. Yeah. Does that
Um,
help to answer that? I don't even know if I truly answered it.
of course you answered it. You're deep. I'll go to what he said in a second. Can neuroplasticity heal executive functioning, ADHD, etc.? I'll take a chop at that. I don't think anything heals it because it's how your brain is wired. It's not making an excuse. It's not make your brain is just wired a certain way. I always look at it as somebody who's neurotypical. If you look at their brain waves, they're kind of straight. They're kind of linear. Somebody who's neurodivergent, their brain waves kind of crisscross. So no matter what you look like, your brain is always going to be wired different when you have, that kind of neurodivergence. But your turn. Time for the smart
No, you did that just fine. Yeah.
Adam said that acknowledgement is the biggest key with this. He is deep. He's a very deep man. He knows 6 things now, apparently. And John said, I don't think classroom. Oh, you can talk more about classrooms. I always say that it's so hard because from 4 or 5, we're being told, sit down, shut up, listen, and learn.
Yep.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard for kids, especially with ADHD, that diagnosis. So school. Tell me more about school. You went to Suffolk County, Suffolk, right?
Yeah. So what I did after I got I got a bachelor's degree, right? And I needed insurance. So I landed myself working in a childcare program in an infant classroom. And here I am, 21 years old, like taking care of like 8 babies. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. And I kind of like this. So I just enrolled in Suffolk Community College and took some early childhood classes, like just because I'm kind of a nerd. So I was a nerd then, I'm a nerd now. It's fine, accept it. But I wanted to learn more because parents were asking me questions about their babies. And here I am, like, I want to know more about this. I want to learn all about this infancy age. And so that's what I did. I went back there just took a couple classes, but then I received my master's in early childhood education with a focus in teaching adults early childhood education. And I actually did that later once I was married and had children, and I was already a director of a school at that point, is when I went back.
Was that like 22? 23?
I was 26. No, when I went back, I was a director at 26 of a childcare center. And then after I had just had Maggie, I finished my master's. So that was 2013, 14. Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel, again, like I need to go back to school right now. You were running the school. You're doing a whole bunch of work with kids. You had a room full of babies. You were the regional manager for OCFS?
The Child Care Council of Suffolk. So, but I'm funded through OCFS.
Oh, that's right.
The Children and Family Services. Right. So I've been with my agency now since 2010. So about 13 years, I think next week I'm there. And I was hired as, as the infant toddler specialist. And then in the last 2 years, I'm now a regional manager for both the Child Care Councils of Suffolk and Nassau counties. So our work is funded through the Office of Children and Family Services. I know and so I get to go into childcare programs. I get to coach teachers. I get to support parents.
All right. So hold on. Before you keep, tell me your official title so that I can I'm
the infant toddler regional manager. Yeah. That I have specialties in preschool school age as well.
Okay. So you work with pre-4 or younger?
0 to 3. So those
0 to 3.
It's the caregivers that are caring for the youngest children is the bulk of our work. So I have a whole team. We're all out there driving all over Long Island supporting childcare providers. I go into homes. You have family childcare, group family childcare within the home, which is licensed. and center-based. So we're in all of those modalities of care, and it's all free. It's funded. Nothing's free, but it's funded through the Office of Children and Family Services, so we can improve quality. Yeah.
So, all right. A wise lady said, "You listen and give someone my time and my suspend judgment." That's what you said when you talk about working with people, working with these providers. What does just the position you're doing? What does that mean to you?
You know, I found my passion in this work, and I really found my passion when I was able to connect with other adults who loved this work too. And so when I talk about suspending judgment, is that we all have our own viewpoints, our own morals, values, and beliefs. And just because it's different than the way I do it doesn't make it wrong. Right. So I believe in remaining open, actively listening, and trying to place myself into their shoes, right? Before placing any judgment. And so the only way to do that is to be empathetic and to listen and just let someone share their story and their truth. And as long as the truth is shared in love, I think I could take anyone anywhere. So I feel childcare providers work really, really hard, and they have really, really hard jobs, and they're not paid enough for the work that they do. And so they're often undervalued. And I believe that my role on this earth is truly to connect people to resources, whatever that may be and what they may need. And so that's what I mean by suspending judgment. We can't get to that space if we don't suspend judgment.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry, my TV was being a jerk.
Right.
So he did ask a question. I'll suss out the parts that you probably would want to answer. Can speaking to the baby in the womb help with potential cognitive issues? I've never heard that, but you might know more than me.
You know, it is true that the baby can hear you in the womb. And that's why they say to just, there's actually a connection if we talk about adversity, that if, let's say, a woman is pregnant and she's experiencing domestic abuse, and that child in that womb is now hearing, maybe yelling, and now the mother is experiencing toxic stress, that will pass on to the baby. And now the baby is here, right, on this earth, and that baby could be triggered by loud voices. And it could that's all research that I can even share. There is a connection there to utero. Now, every single baby is born ready to learn. 85% of brain development happens by the age 3, and 90% of the brain is developed by age 5. So those beginning from utero all the way through 5 years old is a tremendous time for learning.
Okay, it's a good answer. I didn't know that. So I'm going to just take credit for that. So you work under the ACEs model. Tell us a little bit about ACEs and Nadine Harris Burke, and kind of we'll go from there. Because that's what you do, right?
It's a portion. Yeah, we do a lot of work around social emotional learning, trauma informed care, in hopes to prevent child abuse, prevent expulsion, which there is tons of children getting expelled from as
Mm-hmm.
young as 9 months of age from childcare. So we have infants being
Wait,
expelled,
hold on, time.
toddlers.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. 9 months there. Oh, the troublemaker 9-month-olds.
Usually the number one reason an infant will be expelled from a program is for excessive crying. The number one reason a toddler gets expelled from childcare is for biting, and in preschool for any sort of challenging behaviors. And so a childcare provider may come back, a teacher may say, but I don't know how to handle this. I didn't learn this. And so here we are. And New York State adapted the pyramid model back in 2016. And so OCFS, the Office of Children and Family Services, also added a mandated training category. They used to have 9 categories, childcare providers, that they would have to get training in, 30 hours of training every 2 years. Now they've added a 10th, and the 10th is ACEs. So what we're finding is that folks are not trauma informed. And so ACEs is also known as adverse childhood experiences. And these are adversity that a child has experienced before the age of 18 and how it puts them at health risks in the adult ages. And so Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, if you've never heard of her, please watch her TED Talk. She'll give you the whole spiel on ACEs. But it's basically broken down into abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. And it's actually a questionnaire that you can answer. And if you've had one or more ACEs or 2 or more ACEs, you're more at risk for future health problems and risks. And we say risk, not destiny. And that's really, really important to understand, is that it's just a risk. So when we know we're at risk for something based on past experiences, we pay attention to our health. And so that's a big part of it.
Okay, so when we talk about ACEs, which is around trauma and how it impacts mental health and physical health and stuff like that, it's based in the idea of trauma and how it affects you. When we talk about trauma bonding, as opposed to like masking, like ADHD masking, autism masking, how would you present that? How would you explain that to me? Similarities and differences.
I mean, if a child, what we need to understand, okay, so when we look at children and behaviors,
She put the professor.
we may not know what has happened to that child. So that child's in our space now, right? And the child has a lot of challenging behaviors. I say I, but when I say we, it's my team. Like, we are all passionate about this. Looking at a child, and instead of saying, what's wrong with you, think to yourself, what happened? What happened to you, right? Because they may be showing signs that somebody may say, I think this child needs to be evaluated. I think they have ADHD. I think they have this, they have that. And a child gets evaluated and do not qualify for services, right? So that's 50% of children in Suffolk County that get referred to services only receive it. So think about those numbers. Children are constantly getting referred. We think there's something wrong, right? And maybe they have a delay. I hear that. But when they're having certain behaviors, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a delay. There may be many things that's going on. And maybe you already know about that trauma. So understanding how trauma impacts behavior and development. And so if a child has not had the ability to create a secure attachment to an adult, it leads to all sorts of challenges for them. And if they can't regulate their emotions, they can't learn. And so, not sure if I truly answered your question, but I think, and we've talked about this, a lot of kids are being diagnosed, and is that really the case? And I also find that some parents are like, give me a diagnosis, because then they'll get more services. And the system, it's just wrong. It shouldn't be that way.
So I think it's interesting. We're going to go back to diagnosis in 1 second. Miss Miss Neil Harris Burke said, the repeated stress of abuse, neglect, and parents struggling with mental health or substance abuse issues has real tangible effects on the development of the brain. This unfolds across a lifetime to the point where those who've experienced high levels of trauma are triple the risk for heart disease and lung cancer. An impassioned plea for pediatric medicine to confront their prevention and treatment of trauma head on. So when we talk about trauma, me and you talked a while about the idea of the diagnoses and the perspectives that we work from. I work from the diagnosis perspective, and I feel like you work from the why of the diagnosis. And I work from the diagnosis is the diagnosis, right? And and I don't think either way is wrong. I'm not saying that what you do is wrong. I think it's interesting. Because like your friend said, what's predictable is preventable. And why is that important? Because if I'm looking at a group of symptoms, that makes it easier for me to have an idea of what I'm working on with somebody and what I'm addressing. So, how do you feel about diagnoses? How do you feel about the idea of diagnosis? And we talked about ADHD and autism specifically, but how do you feel about diagnoses?
I feel if it's needed, it's needed. And
Right.
that's I think that's okay. And if that is what is going to get the child what they need, there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
I and so and my mother, she also is in the field and does that the work. She can prescribe medicine, right? So she sees a lot of children and adolescents. That's the audience that she serves. So we talk about it all the time of
Right.
medication versus non-medication, uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, kind of helping with the skills. And there are some children too, because in the classroom, they're being expected to sit for long periods of time. And we talk about it
Mm-hmm.
all the time in my work because in the preschool ages, we're telling them movement, freedom of movement. They have to move their bodies, right? And so they're moving their bodies
Mm-hmm.
and like, oh, you graduated. We're getting you ready for kindergarten. So you need to sit. That to me is their brains are not ready to sit. They still
No.
should be playing. There's
Mm-hmm.
still early childhood education up until they get to third grade, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so there's not enough movement in the classrooms. And so if that's what a child needs, in order to get that time out of the classroom, maybe, or if they have it, they have it. Like I believe it's out there and it should be diagnosed if
Mm-hmm.
the child is really, really if they're struggling, um, then that's exactly what needs to happen. And that's what it's there for, right? So
So when we talk about specifically ADHD, specifically autism, kind of like the OCDs, the anxieties, those on that autism spectrum that are very much person reactivity form, how they're reacting to their environment, how they're impacted by their environment. Um, we talked about the overdiagnosis of autism and ADHD. You said that a lot of times it's a misdiagnosis.
yeah.
Do you want to expand on that?
So we'll hear, as young as 2 years old that children are being diagnosed with autism, and it's just so young to
Yeah.
go there. Or we will have teachers who say we think your child is autistic, and so we try to teach the teachers to not ever put a name on anything. That unless you have those letters next to your name to diagnose, we should never be diagnosing. Um, we're finding or hearing from families that my child was diagnosed with autism but doesn't have autism anymore, right? So you know I just find that people are very quick to label it as something, and that's where they'll say they have this, they have that, but have we looked at everything before coming to this diagnosis? The child's diet,
Mm-hmm.
you know are they sleeping? What's the home
Mm-hmm.
like? Is there, do they have routines? Is there structure? Like, so we try to get to so teachers can call us, childcare providers, teachers, professionals, they call us and they'll say, we have a behavior, can you help us? And so we go in and we try to get to that before, saying to a parent, we think your child needs services, because that, as a parent, and I'm sure you remember, right? As it's so hard for someone else to say to you, we think that something is going on with your child.
Right.
And so we shouldn't take it lightly. And I think it's thrown around very loosely without empathy.
So one of the things I do, because I do find that a lot of doctors and therapists and psychiatrists and so, they're not informative. They're not informative to parents, and I know you had said that there's a need for education. I think there's a need for education in general, because I have a client who's 45 years old and didn't know anything about autism. He only knows what he read from Dr. Google, and it's sad, because could you imagine knowing there's something not right about you and not knowing what it is for 45 years, and then trying to figure it out, and then feeling like you're just a weirdo or strange, and having to resort to all the other stuff, the medication and the drugs and all that stuff, and the alcohol. So the question is more along the lines of, how do you go about educating the parents? I know you work directly with the providers. How do you go about educating the parents and giving them that breadth of knowledge?
So we try hard to reach parents and families. So we are a resource and referral agency. So if any family is looking for resources or even a connection to childcare, they'll call us. And sometimes we get those calls because they say, my child was just kicked out of school, preschool. And that's when our parent counselors will connect that parent to us. And so we don't go into the home. We go into childcare homes only. We're only funded for that. However, I have myself, my team, we have supported many families about educating them on the behaviors that their child is presenting. So if they're being told something's wrong with their child, we then will ask a bunch of questions, and we may also connect them to another agency known as Help Me Grow Long Island. And Help Me Grow Long Island they are another really great organization where they can do screening. And so social emotional screening, it's called the ASQ, ages and stages, and where a parent can just answer these questions. And they're a project out of Docs for Tots, and Docs for Tots came to Long Island to have pediatricians screening more within the office. So the pediatricians are the ones seeing those families, right? And so a screening, it's not a diagnosis. It's just a snapshot in time. It's not an assessment. It's, does your child do this? Yes or no? And so it's a form that they fill out, and potential, strengths will be shared, but also areas of concern is what we'd like to call it, versus a deficit. Like, we try not to use that kind of language, just an area of concern. And if parents are finding this out at very early ages, then maybe that child can qualify for early intervention and catch them up quick, right? And or here are some things you can do at home. So there's apps, there's all sorts of resources out there for parents that they don't know much about. I actually co-facilitate what's called an infancy leadership circle out of Suffolk County. And so around the table are tons of folks.
Right, hold on. I know I broke up your flow.
It's fine.
I'm going to ask this question later, but how do you find time to breathe? Like you do, like I have a lot on my plate, but I feel like your plate is 6 times bigger with 3 times the amount of food.
Breathing is overrated, but
I'll breathe when I die.
I will. No. Well, that is part of my work. So the Infancy Leadership Circle embeds into my full-time work. And so we have been running this circle since 2010. It started out of Stony Brook, and we have tons of people around the table that are out there serving the community all around infants and toddlers. So we have early intervention, we have the Department of Health, we have the WIC program,
Right.
we have tons of people are sitting around the table talking about how do we connect to families? How do we get this information out there? And we support just sharing with families anything that could help them, but it really gets to those pediatricians because they're the ones really seeing the families most often.
Yeah.
And that's where Docs for Tots came about on Long Island, is to get pediatricians to screen more. And so we connect family. Any family can call Help Me Grow Long Island and receive a screening for free. And they'll just send it to their phone and they can do it like with a link on their phone. And then they'll get the results and then call the family back. And it's all this stuff is free that's out there. It's all funded.
I am a big proponent of free because I don't think there's enough free stuff. And as you can read what John wrote, and you can respond to that. I do think that it's not about free versus needing money. They're not knowledgeable. They don't know about programs. Like, I didn't even know about your program, and I've been doing this for about 150 years, and it's just like, you know, and I've worked in all facets where, you know a little bit about social, you know a little bit about this and that, and it's just like, these programs would be great if the information was readily available. But you can respond to what John said. How do you feel about the idea of funding?
Of being dependent on funding? Yeah, I mean, we've been flat funded since 2010 at our CCNR.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's, you know, but you know, it's, I'm not sure I have when I say flat funded, I mean, we've been funded, but we have not had any sort of increase in funding. Childcare providers do not, receive a lot of funding. And after COVID, I think folks started to realize how important the childcare industry is and that we keep families working. And they are probably the lowest paid fields of service. And so it can get really hard without funding.
A smart lady said, "My whole way of being is always about children, but to help the child, you have to help the adult." See, I was taking notes, told you. So when you said that, do you think that it's more focus has to go into working with parents? Do you think that, I know what you do is very important. I'm not saying that it's not.
The parent and the family is the child's first and most important teacher. There is no doubt about it. And every family comes with their own set of morals, values, and beliefs. And who am I to tell someone else, what they should believe? And I do feel that there's a huge line for parent education. And so once I think I told you, like, one time I was on the field and I did say what I do. And I felt like people just started like coming over and they're like, wait, so you know how to handle behaviors, and what do you think about this? And so I just started talking and answering, and we as a team have been talking about how to deliver more free training there are programs that do it. Cornell Cooperative Extension does a ton of parent education. Libraries, I've gone to libraries and have done their I go to like their play groups, and so we stand there and we answer questions, we do things to that sense. I think parents are hungry for this stuff, and I think they get all wrong advice. Like, they turn to Facebook, oh my gosh, and like I'll read some of these responses and I'm like, wow, they don't know. And people only know what they know, right? And so parents tend to rear their children the way that they were reared, or the complete opposite based on the experience. And children don't come with a manual. And so it's really hard. And it's really hard. It's hard on this island. It's hard to make it work. I work work 3 jobs. And so trying to just
How many jobs?
3,
For maybe
maybe
6.
a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I worry for the families that they're not seeing their child. They will drop their child off at 6 o'clock in the morning and pick them up at 7 o'clock at night from childcare, right? And they have no other choice. They
Right.
have to. They have to live here. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing the best they can, and sometimes they'll pick them up at 7, and then they have another job, and they'll drop them to a
Yeah.
family member and then go to their other job. So that need for education in the childcare for those adults to also know the importance of their role is really where our line of work comes in. But we connect families to, there are tons of free training and supports on Long Island that folks are doing. And again, like I said, in that circle, a lot of those agencies sit at the table and we talk about outreach. And there's not enough media outreach for families. If we really go down an avenue, it's how do we get the media to be talking to these families about the resources that are out there for them? They just want to, it's all the wrong messages.
You spoke about partnering to support the child's family dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think and you also talked about policy and procedures with the whole child in mind.
Mm-hmm.
That told you I took notes. So when we talk about the whole child, are we talking about the whole child complete? Are we talking about the whole child environment? Are we talking about the whole child, like his whole kind of universe?
Yeah, that child's whole universe. The whole child is everybody that's involved with that child, right? So their family, extended family, understanding culture. And in some cultures, you don't only have the parents, you have the grandparents, you have aunts and uncles, you have their church community. Understanding the whole child means understanding their family and their culture. And what are they're walking into your environment and your space, and can they see themselves in your environment? Are you being culturally responsive? Are you, can they see themselves in the materials?
Mm.
Are we asking families what home is like? Are we connecting?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of sometimes in childcare centers you'll find that the staff are young because it's a low paying career, right? So they're sometimes using childcare as a stepping stone if they're
Mm-hmm.
working on their degrees. And so they only know what they know, right? And so sometimes they're not confident to say to Achille, tell me about life. Tell me about home.
Right.
What does dinner look like? Do you all sit around the
Right.
table? Do you, understanding that everybody comes with a culture. What does that look like? And to be okay to ask, tell me about it so I can learn. So this child feels safe and comfortable in my environment, because that's how they'll thrive, is when they feel safe. And so that's understanding the
Right.
whole child.
I work in multi-systemic therapy. I don't know what you know about that or not, but it kind of talks about what you're talking about, that the kid is kind of like the center of their universe. And then, you have the other parts that revolve around. You have the parents, you have the peers, which is probably, if not the most influential, it's close. Then you have school and you have the community, and then you have things that they're involved in. And all these things kind of orbit around the kid. And what happens is kids' parents put all the energy into one and forget about the other ones. And that
Right.
really the whole idea of a complete kid is, how do you get all of the things orbiting around the child in balance, which is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard even for families when, think about it. How often have you and your husband had to take one kid one place, the other kid this place and that, and then drop them off and then switch and then throw them across the highway while one person, it's a lot.
It's awful. Yeah, it is a lot. And to even think about that connection between school and home.
Mm.
It,
Mm-hmm.
I there's such a need for that. And I'm that I'm that parent that I will question in a respectful way if I feel that
Mhm.
the rearing practices are not developmentally appropriate. And I
Mhm.
will speak it. And
Mhm.
I did have a teacher tell me that she changed her entire behavior management plan based on our conversations. And
Good.
that to me was huge because at the end of the day, I'm not only advocating for my own children, I'm advocating for all
Mhm.
children and families.
Mhm.
And so that's where my passion lies, is listening to the community and trying to speak it back to those who are impacting children's lives.
Right. Um, One of the things that, I've kind of seen is that every family has its own kind of like culture in their house. Not even like culture like religion and stuff, like their own culture to the family, and
Yeah.
understanding that is so important. Before you were talking about, how many young people we have working in those kind of early years with the kids. Do you think, or how important do you think it is for them to have family, like life experience and like being a parent? Because I used to hear it all the time when I was going in houses. Oh, do you even have any kids? Do you understand? And I used to be like, it doesn't really matter. But I do think it brings a different dynamic to understanding the process.
Yeah. I mean, I was that person, right?
Right.
So I came in fresh out of college. I think your temperament is a key part, right? I thought
Yeah.
it wasn't, and I empathized. I had natural empathy for children and families, but I didn't fully get it until I
Mm,
was in it. And that's
mm,
where I became even more humbled, right? You know, and my sister used to say it to me. She used to say, like, I used to live with them, Kelly and Jerry. And so yes, that's another when they were having their babies, like I moved in with them.
mm,
They took me in, and Kelly used to say I'd come home and judge her. And I believe I did. And I would say, like, oh, if you offer a food 21 times, they'll eat it. And now here I am, a mom, and I'm like, my kids won't eat anything. And I would do that. And she called me out on it like later on. And I had no idea that was a bias, like that I was letting that come out without
mm,
even being a parent and truly understanding it. So I share, like I said, I share my mistakes with others, especially when I'm talking to teachers, and a bias will come out and they'll be like, oh, well, they don't even care about their child. Their child's here from this time to this time. And I'm like, whoa,
mm,
ouch. Like, trust me, they do. And, you know, and so they'll say things like, I see the parent like, I'm like, no, sorry about that. It takes a special person. Do you think being a parent should be a prerequisite for people? I don't think so. I like I said, I did it well. I did that care well. It just, my disposition, based on experience in general,
mm.
I had the knowledge. I was able to put even more into practice once I was being a parent. And
Yeah.
so it even helped me to be a better parent. I felt like I thought it was preparing me. And in some ways, I'm like, whoa, I was not prepared for this. And
Mm,
though I was, right? I already gave me
mm,
patience. It gave me the ability to communicate better. So no, I don't think it should be a prerequisite, because there's also a lot of fascinating people in our field that are not parents at all.
yeah.
And their passion has been just about serving the community and children. So, um, and working with children is not for everybody.
Oh, no,
It's, and
not at
I
all.
I have coached some people out of the field by seeing that they're burnt out, or, you know, we do a lot of work around preventing child abuse and neglect.
Hmm.
And that is sometimes within the childcare sector itself, and because it's a very trying job, and it can be really it is not can be, it is stressful. So if you have children in childcare, please take care of your teachers. They are working really,
Mm.
really hard.
You were talking before about kind of like the classroom dynamic, and I think it's important to talk about. I know you don't really deal with the IEPs and all that stuff and the CSEs. I'm sorry, the CSEs and the 504s. I know you know what they are. Um, I do think it's hard because parents go in and most of the time they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know, they don't have that information about what accommodations help kids and don't help kids and stuff like that. And then you have teachers who have the 504, which is supposed to be a legally binding document,
Yeah.
and they just ignore it because some of these teachers are so caught in their ways. You're teaching 200, 150, 200. You don't want to take time to cater to little Tommy and little Michael and little Michelle and little Susie because you have the other 192 kids that are, typical. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think the environment has a huge effect on, children's behavior in general. And children don't learn from people they don't like. And
Nope, not at all.
that's just truth, right? It is truth. And so if a teacher doesn't follow, and parents, so that's another advantage of Help Me Grow Long Island is they will educate parents as they go into those meetings because there are parents don't understand it and nor should they didn't go to school for it, right?
No.
Like they may not have it, it's almost like if you're in a doctor's office and they start talking to you about medical stuff, you're like, wait, what? And it's the same thing. And I feel, and then there are parents who don't, that's not their home language.
Yeah.
And so now they're in a meeting, a CPSC meeting, and someone is trying to interpret, and that may not even be translated correctly, right? So there's so many challenges with that. And then the fidelity of if it's happening in the classroom, and then who could they speak to if it's not happening in the classroom? Those parent advocates need to, there are some that are really good at it, and there's a need, a support need that someone should be with them, almost like, hold on, wait, let me, because it's the louder you are, the more services you're going to get, or the more right, and speak up. They'll be like, okay, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And I'm not sure if teachers are not following. I can't speak to that because I'm not in the elementary schools. I know in the childcares, if they have an IEP, we really encourage that the teacher is at those meetings and that we don't pull out, that we consistently push in, so that the teacher can learn. And so we do a lot of education there around those partnerships and building those partnerships so that everyone's at the table for that.
They should be. What I'm liking that is they're starting to put the kids in now too. They're starting to include the kids in it. That's great. Kids, I think that's important because they first need to understand what services they're entitled to. Yeah. And they need to understand what they can ask for, because a lot of times, the couple of girls I work with, teenage girls, they won't ask. They're too shy. They won't say, I need to do this, I need to do that. So I think it's important that, they're able to advocate. So John said that no knowledge, there's no knowledge that is not power. And I agree. Working with somebody autistic and my brother being autistic are different than my son being autistic in the experience. And when people find out that I actually know what I'm talking about, my wife actually knows what she's talking about in these CSEs, they kind of like, oh, yeah. They have different responses. It's a different level of respect, sort of.
I know. Yeah.
It's interesting because, again, the knowledge is important. When you talk about the environment that you kind of create, how hard is it for you to go into these meetings or speak to teachers and not be like, listen, let me tell you everything that you're doing wrong?
Because we follow
practice. About the lie. I'm talking about in your life.
Oh, in my life? Like,
with your kids.
Then repeat the question, because then I have
The question is, how hard is it for you when you're dealing with teachers for you to not go in and be like, listen, I understand you're tired, but you just don't know what you're doing. I do. I do this professionally. Let me walk you along the road, the yellow brick road, to what you're supposed to be doing.
Because no one can learn that way.
Do you want your teachers to learn, or you want them to just do it?
You have to buy
Colleen,
in.
do you want your teachers to learn, or do you want them to just do it?
I want them to do both. I want them to.
I'm telling Kelly on you, you're lying. You just want to do it. You want to just listen to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anybody is willing to listen, that's the thing with this work. It's vulnerable work and it's tricky work because it's so emotionally connected. And when it's for us, like as a team, it's all about relationships. And so without a relationship, you can't get anywhere with anybody. My mask is about to come off. I'm very real, though. I have to say, I make tons of mistakes. And sure, there are times
we're not going to talk about
like,
these fake mistakes that you make. We're not doing that right now.
Okay.
You talked about reflective supervision. What is reflective supervision, one? And how does that impact you personally day to day?
Yeah. So, reflective supervision is a practice that professionally you do with, the way that we do it is I receive reflective supervision and I'll give reflective supervision. And so I'm learning actually, it's called the Mary Ellen Institute on how to do reflective supervision. And it's a conversation. It actually feels like therapy a bit. It's about our own goals and our own feelings and unpacking the work in a safe space. Usually there's group reflective supervision and there's individual reflective supervision. And so the idea is that you can talk out your challenges and your problems with someone that is trained to do reflective supervision. It is relationship based. Again, it is intended to where somebody may ask a question and it's not the person. So I wouldn't be solving problems. I do tend to jump in and try to solve problems.
No, that's a shocker.
And in reflective supervision, it's more about asking clarifying questions, listening, acknowledging feelings, and really allowing that person to lead the conversation and set goals for themselves. But it's not about us saying, okay, this is what you need to do, or it's a space to talk about and get deep on many, many topics. So we're so fortunate in this work that we do that we have a lot of time for that kind of work. We make time for that kind of work because if we can't go in to do this work burnt out. And so reflective supervision actually decreases burnout because it's a place to unpack the work. And build your own professionalism. So it could be just you and I talking. It feels a little therapeutic, but it's not intended for that. But it's different. It is not like a management meeting. It's not like a to-do list. It's let's highlight a specific topic and let's talk about it.
How often?
And so it aligns with the work too that we do.
Interesting. How does that impact you personally? And do you find that like the kind of, maybe not the conversations, but kind of things you talk about, do you feel it, seeping into your everyday life?
Yeah. So I do. I reflect every single day on each day personally. And not in a way that I'm looking to beat myself up it's to be reflective is to be vulnerable and honest with yourself. And so I try to live where I ask I wonder questions versus coming to a conclusion, right? So I'll give you a very general example. On Long Island, traffic, you get cut off, like people drive, in all sorts of ways. Let's say I get cut off and I'm instantly getting upset. I will say to myself, I wonder if they just got a call that their, person is being rushed to the hospital. And then I instantly start to calm down. Now, it's probably not true, right? But it's keeping my peace. I work really hard on trying to keep my own peace and to not go to those places because it's easy to go there. It's easy to get mad. It's easy to let it ruin my day. And when you're in a reflective space, it's keeps me going, right? So even with children, the mask is about to come off.
The mask is off.
It's off. I mean, that doesn't mean I don't lose my cool, but we use that work with children. Like child is throwing themselves on the floor, they're crying, they're upset. I wonder if they had a good breakfast. I wonder if they got enough sleep last night. I wonder if this environment is working for them.
How hard is that? How hard is that concept to teach to somebody that's a parent or provider to go to immediately, to go to first, as opposed to be reactionary?
Yeah, that's where the coaching comes in. And so we'll do this coaching and it takes a long time because number one, it's relationship based. So somebody has to feel comfortable to go there with you, right? You have to connect with them in some way. And then we do a lot of training. So I do a lot of what's called pyramid model training, which is we examine our own hot buttons because what hits your buttons may not hit my buttons. So like a hot button for me is whining. Like if my kids start to whine, I feel like the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Like it, gets me. And I know that when I get there, I've figured out ways to keep myself calm. And so I do that work with childcare providers. We will examine our own hot buttons. We write them down. We then reframe it. So asking I wonder questions is a technique that we call reframing. Reframing behavior, reframing our thinking to keeping it more positive than negative and trying to get to so all behavior has meaning. So we get to the why behind the behavior. And when we get there, then we can teach new skills.
All right, we're going to shift a little bit. Amazingly, you have time to have a marriage and children and be a mom and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And why the hell would you want to be the vice president of the PTA? What compelled you to say, oh yeah, I'm going to be vice president of the PTA?
I'm not sure because one thing I have to work on for myself is learning to say no. No, right? Boundaries. It's something that I've worked on.
I wonder why Colleen don't say no to anything.
I just wanted to always be in. This was the one year that all three of my kids were going to be in the same elementary school, the last year. And so I thought it would be a good idea. That was a lot. Teaching, I teach at SUNY Farmingdale. That's a lot. But I really love that work. The vice president, I'm going to do it for one more year. I told them. And then, I think I'll move on from that.
So you want every level of the hierarchy in every type of position. You're a regional manager in one, you're the vice president in another one, you're teaching, you want to do all these things. We talked about your plate. How do you keep the pressure, the extrinsic pressure, from becoming intrinsic and kind of be too much for you? You like that question?
I actually love that question because I use that intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation a lot when talking about children. I have to say this spring with the sports and everybody played multiple sports and then my career, my husband works nights and I work days and it gets really, really hard. And so we definitely took too much on, and I'm taking that as a lesson learned. Um, Somehow still able to get it all done and do all the work and get everybody, but it really wasn't enjoyable. And so
Mm.
I am now in a reflective state again of I want my children to want to be able to do everything that they want to do. I still am growing my career and I'm not stopping, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where can we find that balance? And it's a different kind of hard than being in school, that school age, right? Like they say, bigger kids,
Mm-hmm.
bigger problems. I know it's only going to get harder. So
Mm-hmm.
the plate is very full. And so we've been talking about ways of how can we cut back and still allow for the goodness, you know. I'm working on that.
So
I
let me
did it.
ask you. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. You're working on it, working on it. All right. So when you see somebody like the Walshes and their kids play 43 sports and do 8,000 different things, how do you view yourself in comparison to them in terms of their plate versus your plate? Do you think your plate is the same? Do you think it's less than? Do you think it's more?
I I think our plates are similar.
Uh,
I look at them. I mean, they're
yeah,
amazing.
they're like a
Um,
well-oiled machine. They don't have time.
they're incredible, and I've always admired, you know, the way that they. Even my
Mm-hmm.
sister's children are just such wonderful humans. I mean,
Well, one of them is.
yeah. But what I do say to Kelly when we talk this stuff out, because I will
Yeah.
call her to vent it and like
Mm-hmm.
have my moments, and I definitely had some moments this
Mm-hmm.
spring. It was not pretty. I wasn't feeling my best self, and so when talking to her, I said, Kelly, Jake and Aiden are a unit. Like they go to a field at the same time. Like I have three that are playing on three different fields, like in three different sports, like all over the place. And it came down to us really talking about what is going to make what brings these kids joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so why not let them cut back if it's not bringing them joy? So I
Mm-hmm.
think my work ethic that I learned watching my mother work multiple jobs, she still at
Mm-hmm.
72 years old works 70 hours a week. That's all I knew. So when we talk about culture, that was my culture growing up, watching my mother work her butt off. Um, and so Kelly works a lot. Jerry works a ton. So does my
Mm-hmm.
other sister and her husband. Like we all, and is that really living? And so I do find
Mm-hmm.
it's tricky because I find so much passion in my work and I get filled at home and at work. I love that work. I love the work that I do. It is really fulfilling. It just I work with amazing people that we
Mm-hmm.
lift each other up. Now, when I say about therapy, and I've had these women that I work with have seen me in some of my hardest times of
Mm-hmm.
having babies, making mistakes, and all we do is build each other up. And it's a beautiful environment to work for that
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine not being around them. And I can't imagine not being home and doing all of this stuff. I think um the work life balance, my agency is very flexible, so they allow me to be home in time for the bus every day.
Oh, wow.
No questions asked. Um,
What time do you start?
I'll start I'll be like out in the field by 9. I'm home in time for the bus and then I sign back on later and I get that
Oh, okay.
work in. I get it in other ways. But we have an executive director that just truly believes in that work-life balance. And so I think that that's a big key part. It sounds like it's a lot and it is a lot, but I have an amazing team that's doing it with me. And so if it gets too much for me, like Jamie, who is on, she'll be like, I'll take it for you. I'll do that training. I'll do this. And we balance and work off each other. We really do.
So I asked that question because you started off at 9 having a team around you, and you guys all kind of working together to kind of, I don't want to say fill in for what your mom didn't do because I'm not going to, because your mom's awesome.
Yeah.
you had that team that filled in, that did that job, and now you still have that team and different components, but also you're still kind of looking at what Kelly, like the lead Kelly gives, and I think that's interesting. How has your relationship grown? You know, same amount of kids, all that stuff. Interesting dynamics that it's kind of like mirrored. What have you learned, the uber professional, from when you were living with them to now from her?
I mean, I've looked up to my sisters always, and
Mm-hmm.
she's my like they both I have such strong relationships with both of my sisters and
Mm-hmm.
in different ways, right? If you know, for instance, we had our cousin passed away suddenly
Mm-hmm.
a few years ago, and so I was tasked to do the eulogy. Now here I am doing the eulogy in front of like over 100 people, and I have Kelly in one side telling me, "You got this, you can do this." And am I allowed to curse on here?
Yeah.
Okay. And on the other side, I had, because I started to cry, I had
Yeah.
Katie goes, "Shut the fuck up and get this done." Right in my ear. So I have Kelly in one ear, like, "You got this, Colleen, you're amazing." And Katie's like, "You will pull it together." Like, that's the difference that I have on both my shoulders. And it's incredible. And so, sorry, I didn't mean to say that word. That's not the nicest word, but
No,
that's
no, you're
exactly
fine.
what she said.
You
And I
curse.
did, and I, like, picked myself up, and so, like, I have a toughness and I've got a sweet side, and I've gotten it from both of them.
Yeah.
That Kelly is just a natural caregiver. Katie will, like, jump through hoops for anybody. And my brother will call me he actually will text me every day at 11:11, "I love you." Like, that's it. Kelly's on there, yeah. And I just we are a unit. We've
Yeah.
always been a strong force of a unit. And so, like, Kelly will take my kids to their practices. Like, so I do ask for help. And she'll never tell me no, like, ever.
Mm,
Yeah. But I don't ask often, but when I ask, it's always yes. It's Jerry too. Jerry's my BFF. So he
I
only
see.
tells me he loves me like twice a year. I'll get it. But
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
and that's fine
Hmm. That's
because he
that's
loves
fine.
me every day. I know he does.
Um, you teach. Kelly teaches. Your mom is in a helping field. Your sister works with people too.
Yep.
How did you guys all get into that kind of same niche of being around people, working with people, helping people?
The field of service. I mean, I've always been drawn to the field of service. I remember in fourth grade, I was on the playground with a first grader and I saw that he had a bruised ear and face. And I reported it to the principal because I thought he was being abused. And, like, I just have always wanted to help. It's in my natural
Mm,
personality. Like, I just like to help people. I like people. I like talking to people. I like meeting people. And in my job, I meet new people every single day. I'm in different homes, I'm in different communities. I it's just something I enjoy.
Liv is your niece. I know
My
you have your daughter.
goddaughter.
Oh, is she? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Um, you have your daughter. Are there any other girls? I'm not positive.
So Olivia and Maggie are the only girls on our side. Yeah.
Okay. So
Mhm.
my question is, what kind of things would you want to teach them as young women? Like, what would you say? Liv's getting ready to go away to college or whatever. What would you kind of tell her? This is something that I didn't hear that you should hear.
Well, you kind of changed my what to just flip it a little bit. What's something we
No, no, no,
always
no, no. Answer the question. Don't flip
what
it.
I didn't hear, I mean, I heard a lot of I have confidence for a reason. But
Okay.
for Olivia is like always know your worth.
Okay.
Just know who you are and be who you are and don't be afraid to and she's not one to form into and follow along based on peer pressure or from what I see. She's
Annoying.
a pretty awesome, unique young lady, I have to say, and she's hilarious. And so I think I never want her to lose that, like lose who she is, ever.
What about Maggie's your daughter?
Yeah, Maggie is fierce. So for Maggie is just, again, it's for me, it's the same as just do you. Like, just who cares what other people think? Who cares if you, I always say what other people think of me is none of my business. I don't want to know it, and I don't care. And but it took me a really long time to get there. And so I wish I could take that and just hand it to her, because it's already starting that she isn't, she doesn't, because she doesn't want people to see her. She's embarrassed. She was called a name at school recently and it was pretty awful. And so like, I want her to just kind of have that self-worth of like, you know, what they think of you is their problem and it's not your business. So just, you know, you don't need people like that.
So little girls, say this little girl, not related to you, looks up to you and says, oh, you know, wow, Miss Colleen, you're awesome. You're amazing. I want to be like you. How does that make you feel?
Honored. Definitely honored. I mean, it's, yeah.
You mean, okay. Do you want to impact, I know you like children and all of that in general. Do you feel that you need to be a model, a role model for the young girls?
Yeah, I do. I think that they're so influential, and children are just watching the adults around them all the time and soaking in everything from the way we respond to the way we talk, the way we carry ourselves, the way they see us treating other people. I try to lead with kindness all the time. I know John was saying the mask will come off, but this really is me all the time. And so I try to model that. And I was doing that for I felt like I was doing that as a coach. And that's why I am going to continue to coach, because I do feel that they watch my every move. Yeah.
Oh, they do. I know they do. If you go and play one, softball or cheer, which one would you do?
Softball.
Softball. I knew you were going to say that.
Any day. Yeah.
You said no matter how much knowledge you have, you can't control all of it. You don't even remember saying that, do you?
No.
So
I'm not surprised.
How many different things you know and all the knowledge and wisdom that you have. How can you go ahead?
I think I know where you're going. Like, it doesn't mean I'm always going to respond in the right way. And it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. And even, you know, one of my staff, I manage the infant toddler mental health consultation program as well. So I have a team of social workers on staff one of my team members, she has a baby and she's pregnant with another. And I kind of warned her, I said, everything you think you know is really going to fly out the window for just a little bit, and allow it and give yourself grace is kind of the biggest message of, you know, it is a blessing and a curse to know a lot about early childhood, because you beat yourself up more for the mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then from the first kid to the second kid, the first kid's just nerve-wracking all around. Being married, how long have you been
married? We are together 17 years.
17
and we're married
years. That's 12
years. Yeah.
The same. You've been married 17 years.
Yeah.
So being married 17, going on 20 years. What have you learned about yourself from day one to today?
Yeah, I've learned one that you can't, you have to accept people for who they are, and you can't try to change people. You have to, um, and younger me thought different to today is, we have two completely different temperaments, and that's why we work so well, is that
Mm.
we are that different. And I used to want more outgoing, more of this, but then I realized like that, well, that's not who you married. Like I am enough for the two
Mm.
of us of the outgoing. And, so now I've learned to just be and I guess accept.
Mm.
Yeah.
I got it. I like it.
Yeah.
Right. 2 questions left. You ready?
Yeah.
Second to last question.
Okay.
If you
I'm
could
ready.
teach one lesson to everyone, what would it be?
Oh yeah, that all behavior has meaning. It's like huge.
Mm.
It's huge.
Mm.
And we say it all the time. And I
Mm-hmm.
think once we sit back and really reflect on that and think about what does that mean? There's a lot to it that would
Mm.
come with that lesson, but that's a big message is all behavior has meaning from birth to elderly.
Oh yeah.
There's a why behind all behavior.
I lied. I'm gonna ask you another question.
Okay.
What was my question gonna be? In terms of behavior, no, that's not the question. Are you a better parent? Or are you a better parent kind of provider consultant? I know it's a hard question.
Oh, it really is a hard question. I think I'm a better parent. I do. And they're so different. It's like you can't
Mm-hmm.
even compare them, even though it's the same kind of field of work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, they I give them all of me, like all that I can be, and I let them see the not so great parts of me, and that
Mm-hmm.
exists, and I have to be okay with that. So I'm more me around them, whereas like my professional hat, once it goes on, it's
Time to put the hard hat on and go to work.
yeah, yeah.
All right, last question. If you could be any superhero or supervillain, who would you be and why?
Oh my gosh, superhero.
Hero or supervillain, who would you be and why?
Hero
Or villain?
or villain. This is a really tough one. Okay.
Well, because it's not a academic question.
No, it's not. So you're taking me out of my comfort zone right now.
Good.
Um,
All right, I'll make it easier for you. If you could have any superpower, what superpower?
any superpower.
Any superpower.
If I had a superpower, it's funny because my daughter just asked me this the other day and we went through it.
Catherine said, Shira, Princess of Power. That's who you would be.
Ah, Shira. Yes, she's right. She's right. I love Shira. Um, I would want the ability to fly. I really, really would.
Why?
And I know
Well, then would you get another job? Would you have people hop on your back and fly
I
people
get to
places?
places so much faster than what I have to do now.
Right.
And it would just, yeah.
I love
And
it.
that's it. Sorry.
No, why are you sorry? That's great.
Yeah.
All right, Miss Farrell, I am going to thank you for coming on today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Guys, we had like a 3-hour we could have talked for we only
Forever.
we only touched on like the aces and all of that stuff. That's all interesting. And we're gonna have to sit down in person and have a conversation about that. That'd be fun. I actually have a social worker friend who works with babies and infants and wants to touch base with you.
Okay.
I'll send you information.
Please.
So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to end with the last quote that I used to pass every day going to work. We never stand so tall as when we stoop to help a child. I don't really like kids, but you do. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Don't go anywhere. All right, Colleen?
Okay.
All right. So thank you for joining Everyday Experts. And I will talk to you guys all soon. And I will see you soon. Joker out.